The snow falling outside seemed to wipe away my town. It left it unrecognizable, save for the spire of the church and the golden arches right on the outskirts. Giants with salt shakers. That's what my grandfather always called it. I'd never heard him say it, but my dad had always told me he had. It was dark out as I left the house. My socks were wet and cold from the snow melting and sneaking in through the tears in my boots. I kept trudging along the road. The moon hung over my head like a white sentinel, seeming to spot me amid all the snow, trees, and twinkling lights. I had mapped out the path in my head for weeks. Not much longer now. When I got to the church, I glanced at my phone. 2:43 a.m. No cars in the parking lot, no cars on the road. Just me, the moon, and the huge wooden doors of St. Jude's Church. I'd known for a while that Father Dennis left the back door unlocked when he was running late. He was always running late, so it was always unlocked. I passed through the sacristy and saw all the vestments laid out for Advent. I could hear the living nativity animals outside at the back of the church, if you could call it a nativity. It was a goat, a mule, and a pig. Any one of them noisy enough to drown out any renditions of Silent Night the church choir attempted in the biting cold. I tried to tune them out as I made my way into the church. I took a quick left, went up a flight of cramped spiral stairs, and stepped into the choir loft. Perched up high, I was able to see all the pews lined up in neat lines, the Advent candles in the corner, and the splashes of dark red of the poinsettias all around the altar. I sat down on the cold marble floor and double-checked to make sure the gun was loaded. Pulling my hood over my head, I placed the barrel in my mouth. My tongue recoiled at the freezing metal as I slowly switched off the safety. It has to be done. Just has to be done. I had placed my finger on the trigger when I suddenly realized I couldn't hear the animals anymore. I stood up and looked down at the entirety of the church. Nothing. Just my hot breath forming mist and a statue of a sad, skinny-looking man hanging from 2 pieces of wood. That's when I heard it. A buzzing sound. It was a low hum at first, but then it started to get louder. The sound seemed to jump around. At first it was coming from down by the altar, then muffled from outside on top of the church. Then it stopped. All of a sudden it sounded like it was coming from everywhere. The buzzing grew louder and louder. I covered my ears and crouched down as it started to sound like a jet engine taking off in my head. I had clasped my hands so hard I could feel small gashes on the side of my head from the grip. I thought I heard a loud thump over the noise and the buzzing stopped. Shaking from whatever the hell was happening, I started walking to the staircase. I'll try again tomorrow night. I'll just do it in my apartment the way I'd always thought to. Right before I reached the stairway, I started to hear a loud, scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged. From the echoes and the growing noise, it sounded like it was coming up the stairs. Gun in hand, I quickly hid myself behind the organ and waited. Hopefully, whoever was there would make their way over to the other end of the choir loft, and then I'd sprint down the staircase, through the church, and right out the back door. With my hood up, they'd never know it was me. Wood splintered as the organ was suddenly lifted by a huge shape towering over me. Tossing it aside like trash into a can, the shape flung the large organ across the choir loft and into the pews. Too terrified to move, all I could do was look up at it, dumbfounded. If it wasn't so large and intimidating, I might have just thrown up at the sight of it. It stood nearly 12 feet tall, and its width seemed to stretch across my entire line of vision. It had no mouth or legs, except it had 7 thin, sinewy arms ending in small, chubby digits. A bunch of leathery appendages jutted out from its back. They were almost like bat wings. The largest of them must have been over 8 feet wide, and the smallest looked like tiny branches, dangling uselessly. They would flap sporadically and never in any kind of pattern, so the end result was dizzying. Then the eyes. There were just so many eyes. Looking like fat, bulbous ticks, the eyes covered its body wholesale. Snake eyes, doll's eyes, the compound eyes of a fly, every kind. All of them trained on me. The arm started moving in concert to drag its gigantic form closer to me. As it drew near, I felt extreme heat roll off of it like an avalanche. With my thick winter coat bundled around me, I started drowning in sweat. Adjusting slightly to the situation, my brain reminded me of the cold metal weight in my hand. I raised the gun, closed my eyes, and fired until I heard it click. Opening my eyes, I saw small puddles on the ground. 15 rounds. 15 puddles. The thing seemed unfazed. Suddenly, one of its arms shot out and snatched the gun from my hand. I watched as the gun glowed red and then dissolved into a pool of hot metal, dripping onto the carpet. The eyes never left me. 2 of its arms scooped me up and raised me into the air. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Just racked gasps as its hands held tightly around my waist.
What are you doing here?
The voice smashed through my head like a wrecking ball. I heard the buzzing again, but this time felt something wet in my ears. God, I think my eardrums burst. I could barely make out what sounded like a man's voice in all the pain, fear, and buzzing. Sorry about that. Had the voice on. Force a habit. Okay, one more time. What are you doing here? I struggled to find the words. I think the thing is talking. What? Not that difficult of a question, Billy. What are you doing? Here, in an empty church, at almost 3 a.m, with a loaded gun. It doesn't look good, is what I'm implying. How did you know my name? That's what concerns you right now. No, I just, it's... My vision got blurry as tears welled up in my eyes. Please don't eat me. The eyes covering it that had eyebrows raised themselves. No, I'm not going to eat you. By the way, I'm surprised this instinct of self-preservation decided to kick in now, and not when you had the gun in your mouth. Killing yourself on Christmas Eve. Original. The monster seemed to sigh. Always boggles my mind. What? How easily you things throw away something you can still get use out of. What use? The eyes seemed to roll themselves. Let me provide some context. I've been around since before there was a name for time. And in that extremely long period of quote-unquote time, I've noticed that life is very difficult. Worth it, but difficult. It was difficult when your dad died, Billy. It was difficult when your art teacher did those things. But don't think that spraying your brains all over the missalettes is going to make this better. You've got to do that. It's never going to be exactly what you want, but it'll be yours. I stared wide-eyed at the walking nightmare, laying bare all of my nightmares. I can't keep going on like this and expecting everything to be fine. Everything is not fine. Everything is terrible, and I wake up every morning not wanting to wake up, and I'm taking the steps to end it and find some peace. The heat radiating off of it seemed to rise sharply. Okay, well, diplomacy failed. Bad cop now. Explain to me how that will fix your situation. Please, I'm all ears. Technically, I'm all eyes, because if you can't make fun of yourself, what's the point? Its eyes seemed to consider me, as I stood there sopping wet with sweat, crying in front of all its insane hideousness. You know, I'm not sure if I've ever liked you. Humans, that is. You have a lifespan. You have limitations on the time available to you. You know what gives experiences their meaning? The understanding that that fleeting moment may never happen again. You know how many times moments happen when your lifespan isn't a lifespan, but an endless corridor of eternity? A lot is the answer. But who are we kidding? You're taking steps. You're ending the pain. You're finding peace. Funny how you ending the pain will begin the pain for your mom and your friends and everyone else whose life you touched. You're just gonna rip open rivers of hurt that'll flow through them the rest of their lives. Oh, they'll get used to it, but they'll never be the same. But you know what you're doing. Suddenly, I felt cold metal, and the gun was back in my hand. It's loaded. Take the safety off and put a nice little skylight in your head with your final, ridiculously selfish act. In the end, it's up to you. Die, don't die, live, don't live. I can't make you do anything. I did all I could, for as long as I could. Some other cliche. So, I'm gonna head out. Merry Christmas. Realizing for a moment the insanity of the gesture, I asked, I wouldn't think monsters celebrated Christmas. All of its wings extended and flapped at once. The gust of wind they made was powerful enough for me to shield my eyes. When the wind subsided, I opened my eyes. It had vanished. The organ was back in place. The bullets were back in the gun. Even the puddle of my sweat was gone. The buzzing was gone, too. I felt around my ears, and the blood was gone. I knew my hearing was fine when I heard a faint, quiet voice. Monsters, no. Guardian angels,